Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we are taking a deep immersion into the world of Adeline Virginia Stephen, who, well, the world knows as Virginia Woolf.
A towering figure.
Absolutely. One of the 20th century's most essential and, I think, complex literary figures, an architect of modern prose.
And the sheer amount of material on her life. It's just vast.
It really is. Our sources reflect that. You almost need it because her life itself was as intensely experimental, as searching, and frankly, as conflicted as her novels.
That's really where we want to focus today. Our mission, if you like, is to move beyond just the iconic image, that slightly melancholic photograph.
Everyone knows that photo.
Right, and analyze the actual mechanisms. How did she revolutionize literature? She was pioneering this way of narrating the inner mind, the stream of consciousness, but doing it while wrestling with some profound challenges, severe mental health issues, childhood trauma, and, well, some incredibly difficult, contradictory private views that really complicate her legacy.
We have to look at all of it, don't we, to get the full picture?
You absolutely do. Otherwise, you don't grasp the genius or the cost.
Okay, let's unpack that impact straight away.
Yeah.
Her immediate contributions, what she did to the novel form itself, it was radical.
Totally radical.
She's always credited as one of the pioneers, of stream of consciousness, up there with James Joyce, Marcel Proust.
Definitely in that top tier. But her application of it was really distinctively hers.
How so? What made it different from, say, Joyce?
Well, Joyce, especially in Ulysses, he used the technique in this almost maximalist, exhaustive way, just pouring everything out.
Right.
Woolf, though, employed it with this lyrical quality. She wasn't just recording thoughts. She was capturing the feeling, the receptive consciousness of a character, that internal monologue, the fragmented way memory actually works.
So less about cataloging every thought, more about the texture of the inner life.
Exactly. Texture's a great word. Exploring moments of intense feeling, these transient perceptions, rather than just sticking to external events in chronological order.
And what's amazing is how quickly she made her mark using these techniques. I mean, she started publishing professionally around 1900, but that interwar period, that was the explosion, wasn't it?
Oh, absolutely. Her canonical explosion. You have these seminal works just coming out one after the other. Bang, bang, bang.
We're talking Mrs. Dalloway.
1925.
To the Lighthouse.
1927.
And then that incredibly influential feminist essay, A Room of One's Own.
In 1929, and you've also got Orlando in 28, The Waves in 31, right in that same period. These weren't, bestsellers in the modern sense.
No, not like today's blockbusters.
But critically, and among fellow writers, they were instantly recognized as foundational. This was literary modernism taking shape.
And that influence didn't just peak and fade in the 30s. Thinking about her afterlife, her legacy, she becomes absolutely central again for second-wave feminism in the 1970s.
Hugely important. They rediscovered works like A Room of One's Own and Three Guineas and saw them as defining texts for women's liberation. They really brought her back into the foreground.
And today, her reach is just global. The sources say she's been translated into, over 50 languages?
At least. She's not just a British modernist. She's an enduring international figure. It's quite something.
There's that amazing statistic, too, about the National Portrait Gallery in London.
Oh, yeah, the postcards. They sell more postcards of Virginia Woolf than of anyone else.
More than monarchs, politicians.
Anyone. It just speaks volumes about her cultural weight, her enduring image, that resonance she still has.
But to understand the writer who created these incredibly intense interior worlds, we really need to dig into the roots. Her fierce intellect, yes, but also, tragically, her profound psychological instability.
We have to go back to her birth in 1882 in affluent South Kensington.
Right, born Adeline Virginia Stephen, and into this, enormous, privileged, highly intellectual Victorian family.
Yeah.
A blended family, wasn't it?
Yes, very much so. Her father was Sir Leslie Stephen, a hugely respected writer, critic, historian. Her mother, Julia Prinsep Jackson, known for her beauty, her philanthropy, work as a nurse, a model.
So a powerhouse couple.
Definitely. But the family structure itself was complex. 8 children in total in the household.
8.
Yeah, from Leslie's previous marriage, Julia's previous marriage, and then the 4 they had together, Vanessa, Thoby, Virginia, and Adrian.
Wow. So Virginia grew up navigating this massive, dynamic, probably quite competitive intellectual landscape from day one.
Absolutely. And the connections went wide.
Yeah.
Into the Victorian cultural elite. Her great-aunt was the famous photographer Julia Margaret Cameron.
Right.
And a cousin was Lady Henry Somerset, the suffragette campaigner. She was immersed in a world where intellect, art, social issues, they were all just constantly swirling around her.
It seems clear she was, well, destined for a life of words. Our sources mention she started writing incredibly young, like age 5.
Around then, yeah. But by age 10, she wasn't just writing stories, she was acting as an editor, a publisher even. She founded this illustrated family newspaper.
The Hyde Park Date News.
That's the one. She ran it until 1895, modeled it on popular magazines of the day like Tidbits.
So this wasn't just child's play.
Not really, no. She was observing, reporting on the dramas and eccentricities of this huge household. It was like early journalistic training. Sharpening that eye for detail, for character. That would define her novels later on.
Now, her education is fascinating. There's this paradox, isn't there? Denied formal schooling in the traditional sense.
Right. Her mother didn't believe in formal education for her daughters, thought they should be educated at home.
Which was typical for the time for girls of her class.
It was. But the paradox is, while she missed out on school, she gained something arguably more valuable, or at least different, unrestricted access to her father's library.
His vast and quite unexpurgated library, as she put it.
Exactly, unsupervised access. So she just devoured everything. Literature, history, classics, philosophy, in a way that probably surpassed the foundations many of her male contemporaries got through the more restrictive university curriculums.
So the very system, the patriarchal system, that kept her out of Cambridge, in a way, gave her this deeper, perhaps more idiosyncratic self-education because of her class and her father's intellectual world.
It's a definite double-edged sword.
Yeah.
She did eventually get some formal structure, attending lectures at King's College Ladies Department later.
And she had private tutoring in classics.
Yes, Greek and Latin. And that was crucial, too, because her tutor, Janet Case, became a lifelong friend and was active in the suffrage movement.
So that connected her to the political world early on. Sowed the seeds for her later feminism.
Precisely.
Which brings us, unfortunately, to the darker side of her childhood, the trauma that would cast such a long shadow. Despite the intellectual privilege, those early years were marked by profound tragedy and instability.
Yeah, this is a necessary and very difficult part of understanding her. In her later autobiographical essay, A Sketch of the Past, from 1939,
Yes.
she revealed the source of that early trauma, sexual abuse by her half-brother Gerald Duckworth.
And the sources also suggest impropriety from her other half-brother, George.
Yes, strongly suggest it, especially after their mother died, when George sort of took on the role of guiding the girls into society. It's deeply troubling.
Her mother's death in 1895. Virginia was only 13. That seems to be the first major trigger for her mental health crises.
Absolutely. She called it the greatest disaster that could happen. The sources describe her being nervous, highly agitated for months, and she entered this creative silence, wrote very little for about 2 years.
In that period, between roughly 1897 and 1904, which also included the death of her beloved sister Stella, and this ongoing trauma, she later called it her 7 unhappy years.
A sustained period of loss, hidden shame. It really set the pattern for the later, more catastrophic breakdowns.
And that catastrophe really hit in 1904, didn't it? With her father's death.
Leslie Stephen's death was the final straw. The loss was immense, and it triggered her most severe psychological crisis up to that point.
Severe enough to require institutionalization.
Briefly, yes, under the care of a prominent psychiatrist, Sir George Savage. This lasted from about April to September 1904, and during this time there was at least one documented suicide attempt.
It's crucial to note this timeline. Her struggles weren't just a later life thing brought on by stress. They were profound, recurrent, rooted in her youth, in grief, in trauma.
Absolutely. And these experiences, they weren't just buried, they were channeled directly into her art.
Septimus Smith in Mrs. Dalloway comes immediately to mind.
The classic example, Septimus, the shell-shocked World War I veteran. He hears voices, he's haunted by the dead, very much echoing Woolf's descriptions of her own psychotic episodes.
And importantly, Septimus chooses suicide over submitting to institutional care, right? Under doctors like Sir William Bradshaw, who represent that oppressive medical establishment.
Exactly. It's a literary exploration of the terror Woolf herself felt about that Victorian medical approach, the potential loss of control over her own mind, her interior life.
That fear, that proximity to institutionalization, and the general restrictiveness of that upper-class Kensington life, it eventually led to that famous move, didn't it? The one that brings us to the Bloomsbury Group.
Yes. After Leslie Stephen died, the 4 remaining siblings, Vanessa, Thoby, Virginia, Adrian, made a very conscious break. They left South Kensington, left the Duckworth's influence, left the trauma associated with that house.
And moved where?
To Bloomsbury, a much more affordable area then, seen as more radical, more bohemian, 46 Gordon Square.
And the atmosphere they created there, it was revolutionary for the time.
Completely. The Bloomsbury Group essentially grew out of that house. They started hosting these intellectual gatherings, the famous Thursday evenings.
Trying to recreate the feel of Trinity College, Cambridge.
Exactly, where their brother Thoby had been. They wanted that freedom, that intellectual intensity.
This wasn't just a book club, though.
Oh no, far from it. It was this tight-knit community, bound by a shared philosophy, really, derived from G.E. Moore's Principia Ethica. They valued friendship, aesthetic pleasure, intellectual honesty above everything.
And the core members were Thoby's friends initially.
Yes. People like Leonard Woolf, who Virginia would later marry, Clive Bell, Lytton Strachey, names that become foundational to 20th century culture, all connected by this commitment to modernity in art and in life.
And they weren't just known for being high-minded intellectuals. They had this mischievous anti-establishment streak, too. The Dreadnought hoax.
Yes. 1910. Legendary stuff.
Tell us about it.
Well, Virginia, Adrian, Duncan Grant, and others, they dressed up. Elaborate costumes, makeup, fake beards, skin paint, posing as Prince Mendax and a royal delegation from Abyssinia.
And they managed to fool the Royal Navy.
Completely. Got a tour of the flagship, HMS Dreadnought, treated with full military honors. It was this brilliant, almost absurdist prank. A real poke in the eye to the stuffy imperial establishment. Showed their deep anti-authoritarianism.
So while living this incredibly unconventional social life, she's also building her professional writing career. She taught evening classes for a bit.
Yes, voluntarily at Morley College for working men and women. For about 2 years.
And that wasn't just charity work. It fed back into her writing.
Definitely. That direct exposure to working-class London life, it informs her treatment of class in novels like Mrs. Dalloway, gives it a social dimension often missing in purely high modernist stuff.
And at the same time, she's earning money, writing reviews.
Yes, commissioned reviews for places like The Guardian, The National Review. The sources are pretty clear. She initially used her father's famous name, his reputation, to get her foot in the door.
But her talent quickly spoke for itself.
Oh, absolutely. She wasn't just riding on his coattails for long. Her quality shone through.
This period also brings Leonard Woolf back into the picture. He returned from Ceylon.
Sri Lanka, yes. After 7 years in the colonial service, he came back in 1911, proposed in 1912.
And their courtship, it was complex, wasn't it? She had reservations.
Deep reservations. She was 30, acutely aware of the threat marriage could pose to her freedom, her work, and she was very honest about the physical side.
That famous line in her letter to him.
I feel no physical attraction in you. Stark honesty, as you said.
Yet they married. August 1912. And Leonard made a huge decision.
He resigned his post, gave up the secure, prestigious career in the colonies, specifically to commit to their life together in England. It shows incredible commitment, especially given her fragile health.
And that commitment extended to another monumental choice.
Yeah.
Not having children.
Yes. Leonard was quite firm on that. He believed Virginia was, in his words, not mentally strong enough to be a mother. He worried constantly that pregnancy, childbirth, the strain of it all would trigger another breakdown, perhaps a fatal one.
So the marriage itself became this kind of protective space for her genius.
In many ways, yes. Deliberately constructed that way.
And that fragility wasn't just theoretical. The stress of publishing her first novel, The Voyage Out.
The simple act of reading and correcting proofs. It triggered a massive crisis in 1913, led to a near-fatal overdose of the sedative Veronal.
She was saved by Geoffrey Keynes, the surgeon.
Yes, and that near-death experience was the direct catalyst for their next big venture together, the Hogarth Press.
Right, started in 1917, initially, partly as therapy.
That was Leonard's thinking. If Virginia could publish her own work using a small hand press at home in Richmond, she could avoid the stress, the delays, the rejections, the critical feedback from conventional publishers that might trigger another collapse.
Control the process.
Exactly. But it quickly became much, much more than just a therapeutic hobby.
It became a major force in literature.
A vital hub for the whole avant-garde movement. Their first publication was tiny. 2 stories, 1917, one by her, one by Leonard, printed and bound by themselves.
But from there,
it just took off. They published T.S. Eliot's The Waste Land when other publishers balked.
a huge deal.
Massive. They published Catherine Mansfield, who was a friend but also a significant literary rival to Virginia. And maybe most crucially, they published the first complete English translation of Sigmund Freud.
All of Freud's works. That's incredible.
It fundamentally changed how the English-speaking world thought about the mind, trauma, the unconscious, the very things Woolf explored in her fiction. Hogarth Press was Virginia's sanctuary, yes, but also an engine driving international modernism.
This constant search for mental stability, for quiet, it also led them to seek refuge outside London, didn't it, in Sussex?
Yes, they needed retreats. They divided their time between London and Sussex for the rest of their lives, really.
Their first country place was Ascham House.
From 1911 to 1919, near Lewes. Remote Regency Gothic. The sources describe it as incredibly basic. No electricity, no running water. Supposedly haunted.
And atmospheric.
Very. But Virginia found deep happiness there, finished the voyage out, worked on night and day. It was a necessary escape from the sensory overload of London.
And after Ascham, they found Monk's House.
In Rodmell, 1919. Bought it for £700. This became their permanent country base. Overlooking the River Ouse, the garden was a huge source of pleasure, especially for Leonard.
Monk's House.
Yeah.
It gains this tragic layer later on, doesn't it?
It does. It became their main home after their London places were bombed in the Blitz in 1940, a refuge in wartime. But yes, it was also from Monk's House, overlooking that same River Ouse that she walked down to end her life.
Let's shift focus now to the work itself, the peak of her achievement. She's called, rightly, arguably the major lyrical novelist in the English language. Her novels are so experimental because they refract the narrative through, what? The characters' minds.
Precisely. Through their receptive consciousness, as the critics say, it's where her intellect and her own intense inner experiences fuse. The world she shows you isn't objective, told by some all-knowing narrator.
Yeah.
It's filtered through the specific, often unreliable, subjective experience of her characters. Time itself bends, stretches, governed by memory and emotion, not just the clock.
Take Mrs. Dalloway. On the surface, it's just one day. A society host is planning a party.
Right. Seems simple. But structurally, it's this incredible web of consciousnesses bumping up against each other.
You have Clarissa Dalloway, with her anxieties, her reflections on aging, love, society.
And interwoven with that, completely separate but simultaneous, is the tragic story of Septimus Smith, the shell-shocked veteran.
They never meet, do they?
Never meet. But they're linked by the city, by that single day, and by this shared, profound struggle to navigate their inner lives against society's demands. It's masterful weaving.
And to the Lighthouse.
Huh.
The treatment of time there is just breathtaking. Especially that middle section, Time Passes.
Oh, that's one of modernism's most stunning achievements. Compressing 10 years into just a few pages, showing the house decaying, the family suffering losses, all happening almost outside human focus, marked by the rhythm of nature, the lighthouse beam.
It's like time itself is the main character there.
In a way, yes. And the sea, you mentioned it earlier, it's everywhere in her work, always linked back to those pre-trauma childhood holidays in St. Ives, Cornwall.
Even down to the punctuation. I read something about the semicolon.
Yeah, critics have noted that. She uses semicolons constantly, linking these fragmented thoughts. And its shape, its function of connecting but also separating. It visually resembles a wave.
Yeah.
It's this tiny textual detail that echoes that huge, pervasive sea motif, grammar mirroring nature.
Connecting this back to her life, the Bloomsbury context inevitably brings us to sexuality and her relationship with Vita Sackville-West.
Yes. The Bloomsbury Group, as we said, had very progressive views on sexuality for the time, rejected Victorian morals. The sources note most members were homosexual or bisexual. It created this space where complex relationships could exist more openly.
And her most significant romantic relationship, outside her marriage to Leonard, was with Vita.
Vita Sackville-West, the writer and gardener. They met in 1922. Virginia felt incredibly close to her, placing her alongside only Leonard and her sister Vanessa in terms of intimacy.
And the affair lasted, what, about a decade?
Roughly a decade, yes, though they stayed close friends afterwards. It was intense, emotionally, and creatively vital for both of them.
Creatively vital, leading to Orlando.
Absolutely, Orlando. A biography in 1928. It's essentially a love letter to Vita, disguised as this fantastical literary game.
A fictional biography of someone who changes gender and lives for centuries.
Exactly. From Elizabethan times to the present day, It allowed Woolf to just play with history, gender roles, narrative form in this completely new, joyful way. She told Vita she wrote it just to please her. It's probably her most accessible, playful book, while still being incredibly profound about identity, and a sly dig at traditional biography.
We should probably pause here and acknowledge Woolf's own stated feelings about gender and attraction. She was quite open about it in her letters and diaries.
She was. She wrote about disliking the quality of masculinity, felt women stimulated her imagination more. She even told Leonard point blank she wasn't physically attracted to him, preferred women lovers.
Which makes her relationship with Leonard even more remarkable.
It does, because despite that lack of physical attraction, Leonard became, as she said, the love of her life. Their marriage, the source of stress, was built on this extraordinary, deep mutual love, respect, intellectual partnership, and his unwavering support and care for her. It transcended conventional definitions.
He enabled her work, protected her, and she acknowledged that explicitly, writing that she owed him all the happiness of my life.
It's incredibly moving, that bond.
The other absolutely defining element of her work, especially her legacy, is her contribution to the feminist canon, chiefly A Room of One's Own.
A landmark text. It grew out of lectures she gave at Cambridge in 1928 on women in fiction. But it's so much more than just lecture notes. It's this powerful, researched, rhetorical masterpiece.
And the core argument is just devastatingly simple, isn't it?
It is a scathing look at how women have been historically disempowered, socially, financially, educationally, denied the resources needed to create art, which leads to that famous requirement.
The line everyone knows: a woman must have money and a room of her own if she is to write fiction.
It wasn't just about literal space, though, that mattered. It was a demand for economic independence, for intellectual freedom, for privacy. Her argument was that genius simply can't flourish under conditions of servitude or constant interruption or poverty, which was the reality for most women through history.
And she uses that unforgettable hypothetical, Judith Shakespeare.
William Shakespeare's imaginary sister. Equally brilliant, maybe, but completely thwarted by societal expectations, lack of education, domestic duties, destined for obscurity or tragedy.
A powerful illustration of lost potential.
Hugely powerful. She even connects accusations of witchcraft in the past to suppressed female creativity, suggesting there must have been countless mute and inglorious Jane Austens whose talents were utterly stifled because society denied them opportunity. The essay provides the whole framework for understanding the specific barriers women artists faced.
This exploration leads us then into her own mental landscape and also into the profound contradictions we find in her private views. Her mental illness, as we've discussed, was lifelong, starting at 13.
Periodic cyclical mood swings, initially diagnosed as neurasthenia.
Which was a bit of a catch-all term back then, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Especially for women.
Very much so, covering anxiety, depression, physical symptoms. But modern scholars, looking at her symptoms, Leonard's detailed records, they overwhelmingly suggest it aligns with bipolar disorder.
So recurrent severe depressions, but also periods of mania or hypomania.
Yes. Episodes characterized by racing thoughts, sometimes grandiosity, insomnia, physical issues like debilitating headaches. Leonard's diaries track these cycles meticulously, and crucially, the sources emphasize how she saw writing itself, not just a job, but a survival mechanism.
She explicitly said work was what kept her afloat. That quote.
The only way I keep afloat is by working. Directly I stop working, I feel that I am sinking down.
That metaphor, sinking underwater.
It became her shorthand for depression, for psychosis setting in. But what's fascinating and also disturbing is that she didn't just see madness as the enemy. She saw it as intrinsically linked to her creativity.
She called madness terrific.
Yes, and said, in its lava, I still find most of the things I write about. It was both the source of immense suffering and, in her view, the raw material for her unique vision, the disease and the source.
Leonard consulted so many doctors, but that neurasthenia diagnosis offered little real help. The standard prescription was rest, quiet.
Avoid exertion, mental or physical, which was impossible for someone like Virginia Woolf. And any strain, emotional or intellectual, just seemed to trigger the symptoms again.
This raises such a difficult challenge for us as readers looking back. We see her public self, this fierce, intellectual, anti-colonialist, anti-militarist, pacifist, the author of 3 Guineas condemning fascism and patriarchy.
A progressive icon in many ways, she aimed for an atheist's religion of doing good for the sake of goodness, as she put it in Mrs. Dalloway. Raised agnostic, identified as atheist, critical of Christianity.
But then how do you square that with the contradictions in her private writings? the lack of that humanist generosity towards certain groups.
It's a huge tension. And we have to report impartially what the sources show. Her private writings, diaries, letters, they contain undeniably prejudicial sentiments.
Classism, for example.
Yes, sometimes expressed very harshly. Quotes like, "The fact is the lower classes are detestable." There are also recorded prejudices against disabled people, even suggesting, chillingly, that imbeciles should certainly be killed.
And this complexity becomes most acute when discussing her views on Jewish people, which is deeply uncomfortable, given her marriage to Leonard Woolf, who is Jewish.
It is. Her private correspondence contains frankly disturbing examples of anti-Semitism.
That 1930 letter to Ethel Smith.
Yes, where she writes explicitly about hating marrying a Jew, mentioning nasal voices and their oriental jewelry and their noses, and diary entries where she expresses distaste for the Jewish voice or laugh. It's jarring.
How do we even begin to contextualize that?
Well, context doesn't excuse it, but it's important to note this existed alongside their intense fear and hatred of Nazism and its virulent anti-Semitism in the 1930s. They were terrified of a Nazi invasion.
They had a suicide pact, didn't they? Kept petrol ready at Monk's house.
Yes. To kill themselves rather than be captured. So this profound personal prejudice coexisted with a principled public anti-fascism and a personal life deeply intertwined with a Jewish husband she clearly loved.
It points to deep, unresolved internal conflicts, rooted perhaps in her Victorian class-bound upbringing.
That seems likely. These weren't just abstract ideas. They were ingrained biases she wrestled with, often unsuccessfully in private, even while fighting external oppression publicly. The anecdote about her short story, The Duchess and the Jeweler, highlights this.
What happened there?
In 1938, right when she's writing anti-fascist polemics, she writes the story with a very stereotypical, avaricious Jewish character. The editors at Harper's Bazaar found it offensive, asked her to change it significantly.
And did she?
Reluctantly, yes. But the fact she wrote it that way in the first place, at that time, it just shows how persistent these private prejudices were, even when they contradicted her public stances.
This incredibly complex internal world, combined with the external horrors of the time, it tragically led to her final breakdown.
Yes. The start of World War II in 1939 brought unrelenting stress.
1940, 1941, just relentless blows.
Their 2 London homes were destroyed in the Blitz. Symbols of their life, gone. Her pacifism was strained by the war effort. Her disapproval of Leonard joining the Home Guard. She mocked his silly uniform. And then the biography she wrote of her friend Roger Fry received a cold reception critically.
Another blow to her confidence.
It all compounded. After she finished the manuscript for her final novel, Between the Acts, she slipped into another deep depression. And this time, she felt she couldn't recover.
She knew the cycle.
She knew it too well. On March 28, 1941, she wrote those 2 heartbreaking suicide notes, one to Vanessa, one to Leonard.
And then walked down to the River Ouse.
Near Monk's house. Put a large stone in her pocket. Enacted that sinking metaphor that had haunted her descriptions of depression for decades.
Her body wasn't found for almost 3 weeks. That final letter to Leonard, it's just devastatingly poignant.
It really is. Affirming her love, her debt to him, all the happiness of my life. But expressing her certainty she was going mad again, couldn't face it, couldn't keep spoiling his life. Confirming he had been incredibly good to her.
A tragic end. But her legacy, it was immediate and has only grown.
It instantly solidified and then expanded massively. Her ashes were buried under an elm tree in the garden at Monk's house. A quiet, fitting memorial.
And the public tributes now are numerous. Busts, that full-size statue in Richmond, quite rare for a woman writer. King's College London named a building for her. And those postcard sales, showing her enduring icon status.
And literarily, her influence just keeps rippling outwards. You see her techniques in Toni Morrison, Margaret Atwood.
Gabriel Garcia Marquez even said he learned the interior monologue from Joyce, but preferred Woolf's use of it.
High praise. Her methods really did transform narrative globally.
And for a mainstream audience, perhaps the most visible continuation is Michael Cunningham's novel, The Hours.
Pulitzer Prize winner. Adapted into that Oscar-winning film with Nicole Kidman as Woolf, it brought her complexity, her genius, her tragedy to a huge modern audience.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, it really makes you reflect, doesn't it, on the sheer internal conflict it must have taken to produce such outward-looking, radical, insightful work.
Absolutely. Her creative fire seems fueled, at least in part, by the very forces that threaten to consume her.
Which leaves us, and you, the listener, with this core challenge that Virginia Woolf still presents. How do we reconcile the pioneer, the feminist icon who fought for marginalized voices and against fascism?
With the private person revealed in those diaries and letters, the one harboring deep prejudices about class, race, particularly anti-Semitism, even while loving and being supported by her Jewish husband.
She sought truth in her art relentlessly.
Yeah.
But the forces show her own truth was full of these painful, unresolved contradictions.
So the final thought is really a question for you. What does this tension between the groundbreaking public art and the flawed private person tell us about the nature of genius itself, about personal struggle, about the messy, difficult path of moral progress, even for those we see as intellectual giants? That tension, I think, remains the defining and perhaps unresolvable question of her legacy.